My landlord entered my apartment without notice 11 times. So I installed cameras and sent the footage to the city. He had been in my closet. I knew because my coats were in a different order. I stood in my hallway and stared at them and felt my skin go cold in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature. He had been inside my home while I was at work, without asking, without warning, 11 times. My name is Simone Park. I'm 30 years old. I work as a data analyst for a logistics company. I am methodical by nature and by training. I notice patterns. I notice when things are not where I left them. I notice discrepancies the way other people notice weather. Automatically, constantly, without trying. My landlord's name was Vic Grasso, 58 years old, stocky, loud, the kind of man who filled a room not with presence but with volume. He owned the duplex on Bellard Street, where I rented the upper unit, a 2-bedroom with hardwood floors, a clawfoot tub, and windows so tall they made the ceilings feel higher than they were. I had moved in 18 months ago. Vic had been present at the showing, enthusiastic, warm in the aggressive way of men who want you to like them immediately and interpret any hesitation as a personal insult. He had shown me the unit like a man showing off something he was proud of, pointing out the original molding, the restored floors, the new kitchen faucet he had installed himself. The first month was fine. The second month I came home on a Wednesday evening and found my kitchen chairs in slightly different positions around the table. Not dramatically different, just shifted, the way furniture shifts when someone sits in it. I lived alone. I had not sat in those chairs that day. I had left at 7 a.m. and come home at 6 p.m. and in between I had been at work and the chairs had moved. I told myself I was imagining things. The third month I found a cabinet under the kitchen sink slightly open. I always closed it completely, a habit from childhood, a mother who was particular about closed cabinet doors. I had closed it that morning. It was open when I came home. I told myself I was still imagining things. The fourth month I came home to find a faint smell of cigarette smoke in the hallway outside my bedroom. I didn't smoke. I had never smoked. The smell was faint but unmistakable, and it was exactly the smell of the cigarettes Vic smoked, a specific brand, the smell of which I had become familiar with from every conversation we'd had in the driveway. I stopped imagining things. I texted Vic, "Did you enter my unit today?" He replied 40 minutes later. "Had to check on a small plumbing issue. All good now. No notice, no heads up, no request for permission or entry." I looked up the law. In this state, a landlord is required to provide at minimum 24 hours written notice before entering a tenant's unit, except in cases of genuine emergency. A plumbing issue that was apparently minor enough to resolve without telling the tenant about it was not a genuine emergency. I replied to his text, "Going forward, please provide 24 hours written notice before entering as required by state law." He replied, "Sure, no problem." It happened again 3 weeks later. By month 8, I had counted 7 entries. I knew the number because I had started keeping a log after the cigarette smoke incident. Date, what I had noticed, any communication from Vic. Some entries he confirmed when I asked, some he denied, some he ignored. His confirmations were revealing in their casualness. Yeah, I had to check the radiator, was looking at the window seal, needed to get to the electrical panel. Always something small, always something that could have waited, always something he could have told me about in advance and chose not to. His denials were worse, flat, unbothered, wasn't in your unit, said with the confidence of a man who was certain his tenant couldn't prove otherwise. He was right. I couldn't prove otherwise. I had my log, my observations, my pattern recognition, but I had no footage, no physical evidence, no proof that would hold up against a flat denial. I needed proof. I spent 2 weeks researching camera placement, legal requirements around recording in residential spaces, the specific city codes around landlord entry, and what constituted a violation. I was thorough. I wanted to do this right. I wanted everything I captured to be legally obtained, properly documented, and completely unambiguous. In this state, a tenant has the right to install security cameras inside their own unit for personal security purposes, provided the cameras do not capture common areas or neighboring units. I was capturing my own space, my own front door interior, my own hallway, my own kitchen. I bought 3 cameras. Small, high definition, with continuous cloud backup that stored footage remotely so it couldn't be deleted locally. I mounted them myself on a Saturday afternoon, one covering the front door interior, one covering the main hallway, one in the kitchen with an angle that showed the room without capturing anything private. I did not tell Vic. I went to work on Monday. He came in on Tuesday. I got a motion alert on my phone at 11:23 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was at my desk. I opened the app. Vic walked into my apartment at 11:23 a.m. He had a key. Obviously, he had a key. He was the landlord, and he let himself in with the comfort of a man who had been doing this for a long time. He didn't look around cautiously. He didn't hesitate in the doorway. He walked in like he owned the place, which legally he did. The building, not my home. I watched on my phone screen as he walked through my hallway into the kitchen. He opened a cabinet, the one under the sink, the one that was always slightly open when I came home, and looked at the pipes beneath it for about 30 seconds. Then he closed it. Then he walked down the hallway toward the bedrooms. My bedroom. He stood in my bedroom doorway for a moment, just stood there, looking in. Then he walked back toward the front door. He was in my apartment for 4 minutes and 17 seconds. He had not told me he was coming. He had not provided 24 hours notice. He had not cited any emergency. He had walked into my home in the middle of a Tuesday, looked through my cabinets, stood in my bedroom doorway, and left. I sat at my desk and I watched the footage 3 times. Then I forwarded it to cloud storage, downloaded it, backed it up in 2 additional locations, and sent a text to Vic. "You entered my unit today without notice. I have this on camera. Please provide 24 hours written notice before any future entry as as required by state law. The reply came 40 minutes later. I own the building. I have a right to check on my property. I read that text and felt something settle into place. Not anger, clarity. He actually believed that. He had been doing this for so long, to so many tenants without consequence, that he had crossed the line from ignoring the law to genuinely not believing it applied to him. I put my phone face down on my desk and I went back to work. I had more documenting to do. Over the next 3 months, Vic entered my apartment 4 more times, 11 total. Each time I got the motion alert. Each time I watched the footage. Each time I downloaded and backed it up. Each time I sent Vic a text citing the statute. Each time he responded with some variation of the same unbothered dismissal. Entry 8, needed to check the boiler connection. Entry 9, there was a noise complaint from downstairs. There was no downstairs, it was a duplex, and Vic lived below me. Entry 10, routine property inspection. Entry 11, which happened on a Friday afternoon while I was working from home and was therefore in my own apartment when the door opened, was the one that changed everything. I was sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop when I heard the key in the lock. I stood up. Vic opened the door and stepped inside and stopped. We looked at each other. For a moment, he seemed genuinely surprised, as if he had somehow, after 11 entries into my home, not fully processed that a person lived here, that this was someone's home and not just a unit in his building. Simone, he said, didn't know you were here. Was going to check the bathroom vent. I had a log going back 18 months. I had a man who had just stood in my doorway and told me to my face that he'd send a text next time, as if next time was the issue, as if the previous 11 times were simply a warm-up. I called my friend Dara. Dara was a paralegal who specialized in tenant cases. She had been telling me since month 3 to document and file. I had been documenting. I was finally ready to file. I sent Dara everything the next morning. 11 clips of footage, the full text exchange log, my written entry diary going back 18 months, the specific statute language on landlord entry requirements and the penalty provisions. Dara called me after 2 hours. Simone, 11 documented entries. The first 7 are in the log, with contemporaneous text exchanges where he either confirmed or gave non-emergency explanations after the fact. His casual confirmations, had to check the radiator, was looking at the window seal, were admissions. He had been acknowledging unauthorized entries in writing for 18 months without realizing that's what he was doing. What are the penalty provisions? I asked, even though I'd already looked them up. In this state, each unauthorized entry is a separate violation. Fines per violation plus the tenant's right to terminate the lease without penalty and seek damages for the cumulative pattern of harassment. Repeated unauthorized entry that creates a pattern of intrusive behavior can, in some jurisdictions under this state's statutes, support a claim of constructive harassment, the landlord's behavior making the tenancy untenable. That carries enhanced damages, so certain that ownership meant access, and access meant whenever he wanted, and whenever he wanted meant his tenant had no recourse. He had 11 pieces of footage suggesting otherwise. We filed the complaint with the City Housing Authority on a Thursday. 11 violations, footage attached for 4, full text documentation attached for all 11, my 18-month log, Dara's legal analysis of the applicable statutes. The Housing Authority in our city had a dedicated landlord harassment unit. It had been created 3 years ago after a series of high-profile cases involving landlords using unauthorized entry as a pressure tactic to force tenants out of rent-stabilized units. The unit took documented harassment cases seriously. They had staff specifically trained to evaluate exactly this kind of pattern. Our complaint was assigned a case number within 48 hours. An investigator called me within the week. I sent her everything. She asked 3 clarifying questions. She watched the footage. She reviewed the text log. She said with the measured professionalism of someone who had seen a lot of these cases, Ms. Park, this is one of the most thoroughly documented unauthorized entry complaints I've reviewed. Dara also sent a demand letter, separate from the city complaint, directly to Vic. It enumerated all 11 violations, cited the penalty provisions, demanded compensation for the cumulative pattern, and informed him that we had filed with the Housing Authority's harassment unit. Dara told me later that Vic had called her office 20 minutes after receiving the letter. He was loud. He used the word outrageous 3 times. He said the camera was an invasion of his privacy. A remarkable claim about footage taken inside my apartment of a man who was inside my apartment without my permission. Dara let him finish. Then she told him about the footage. Then she told him about the 18-month text log. Then she told him about the harassment unit investigator who had already reviewed the case and scheduled a follow-up. Vic got quiet. Dara told him what settlement looked like. The settlement took 3 weeks to finalize. Vic paid damages for 11 unauthorized entries at the statutory per violation rate. He signed a formal agreement prohibiting any further entry without proper notice, with financial penalties built in for violations. He provided a written acknowledgement, carefully worded, but an acknowledgement that his entry practices had not complied with state law, and my rent was frozen for 18 months under a binding addendum to my lease. I sat in my kitchen on the evening after I signed the settlement documents, and I looked at the front door, the door that Vic had walked through 11 times like it was his. It wasn't his, it was mine. I rented it, I paid for it. I had the right to come home to it and know that only I had been there. That seemed like a simple thing, a basic thing. The kind of thing that shouldn't require cameras and documentation and a harassment unit investigation and a settlement agreement. But it had, and now it was done. My phone buzzed on the table. A text from Dara. Housing Authority investigator just called me. They're expanding the review to Vic's other properties. A Apparently, 2 tenants in his other building came forward after word got around about the complaint. Both have documented unauthorized entries going back over a year. I looked at the front door for a long moment. Vic owned 3 properties in the city. The housing authority was now looking at 2. I picked up my phone and typed back, "Send them my contact information if they need documentation support." I set the phone down. Outside, the city was loud and ordinary and indifferent, the way cities are. Inside my apartment, every light was exactly as I had left it. Every chair exactly where I had placed it. Every cabinet closed completely. My home, mine.